what a lovely sound. Too bad you can't indulge like I can because you went too far last night and now your head is throbbing. You've got the mother of all headaches, and I have to nurse you through it. Greetings and salutations, everyone. It is time for the weekend edition of Sports Frenzy 2.0. I am your Uncle Kev, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Solo this week, as we've had the week-long celebration of the Conquistador's birthday, so he took the week off, and I still say I would love to have his vacation plan, because the Maestro never takes weeks off. I'm always here for you. So, of course, this is your Saturday morning hangover cure. So fry up the eggs, get the bacon and sausage going, coffee percolating, or if you've got one of those fancy Keurig machines, pop a pod in, pop a couple aspirin, and let us get into our weekly recap of the world of entertainment and pop culture. Now, for music this week, we always start off, of course, with music here on the weekend edition. Things are a little scarce in terms of concerts. The weather here outside the Sports Frenzy studios is miserable, and that's the way it is pretty much across the entire country, even the deep south getting hammered with ice and snow. So you don't see as many tours, you don't see as many shows. There are still some out there, but it effectively shuts those of us out in the upper Midwest for the most part. So we're on a break from concerts. There's not really much in terms of new music. We will have some songs next week. Maybe, finally, we're going to go back and review Smashing Pumpkins' new album, Agori Mori Me, from the fall of 2024. But I thought I'd do something a little bit special today for you kids, since your Uncle Dave is not here. We're going to go in the Wayback Machine. I am going to give you story time. Now, we normally do story time for movies, for the most part, where something happened over the last couple of weeks where your Uncle Dave or I or both of us will go revisit a classic movie. That is our loophole. That is our excuse to be able to review a classic movie that we've seen many times, yet again, for your benefit. But I am going to have story time for you now as it pertains to music. Kinda, sorta. No, I'm not going to review a classic album for you, although I've been thinking about this, and I'm wondering why we don't do this. Why can't we do story time for classic albums when we've got downtime like this right now where there's not new albums being released? Something I'm going to have to bounce off the Conquistador. But this is kind of a combination music and movie story time. Now, a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, when I was doing research for my other podcast, which is called The Fortress of Rock. I don't like to publicize it when Dave's around. That's not fair to him. But since he's not here, let's talk about The Fortress of Rock. My podcast about classic rock and roll every Friday night. New episodes drop. When I was doing research for one of the segments on The Fortress of Rock, where we go back in time and look at classic moments in rock and roll history, one of those moments was the 1969 Rolling Stones Altamont fiasco. Of course, the Rolling Stones gave a free concert at Altamont Speedway. It had been moved from 2 different locations to Altamont. And if you know anything about your rock and roll history, you know that it was a nightmare. The Hells Angels were brought in to basically provide security, and they were paid with free beer. So before we go any further into the history of this tragic moment in rock and roll history, what I'm doing here is I went back and I'm going to review, because I never watched it before. So in that way, technically I don't need the loophole. Even if it's an old movie, if I've never watched it before, I don't need story time as an excuse. But I'm giving you story time anyway. So on HBO Max, I found Gimme Shelter. Gimme Shelter is the documentary about what happened at Altamont. Now, Altamont happened in 1969. I believe Gimme Shelter came out the next year. About an hour and a half runtime, give or take a few minutes. So I'm going to review this for you. And in the same breath, in the same instance, going to give you your history lesson of rock and roll for today. So, the first half of Gimme Shelter, about the first 45 minutes, is a little bizarre. Not like experimental, weird, bizarre, just you're wondering when you're actually going to get to a discussion, to the footage of what happened at Altamont. Because the first half shows a lot of performance footage from the Rolling Stones at a New York concert. I guess what they're trying to show is how the crowds in certain venues, for the most part, could behave themselves versus what happened at the free concert in Altamont. Now, what they do is they cut back and forth between these Rolling Stone performances in New York, and they are tremendous. Let me just say this. It might not hold up in terms of a narrative thread, but the performances from the Rolling Stones are exceptional. So that's what gets you through the first half. Also, there is an absolutely, oh my God, dare I say sensual performance from Tina Turner. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Let's just put it this way. What she does with a microphone and a microphone stand for a couple minutes in her performance, and again, I think this is them playing with the Stones at the New York show that's featured in the first half of Give Me Shelter. Wow. Sexy, sexy, sensual, beyond all belief. That's worth the price of admission alone. And yes, I know the backstory of what was going on at that time with her and Ike. So let's not go into the hashtag #MeToo crap, okay? Just take it for what it is. It was a very sexual, very sensual performance. But what they're doing here in Gimme Shelter is they're interspersing, at least through the first half, interspersing these performances from a different concert altogether with negotiations and things going on behind the scenes as the managers, the lawyers are trying to set up this free concert basically at the last minute. And they're discussing things with the sheriff in terms of parking. They're discussing things with the owner of Altamont Speedway. So in that sense, yes, it does lay the groundwork for what's to come. But the first half comes off as very disjointed in terms of what it's going to lead into. It almost seems in many ways unnecessary, except for the few behind the scenes moments that are, of course, foreshadowing the disaster that is to come. But otherwise, it's just a really cool Rolling Stones concert, is basically what you get for the most part in the first half of Gimme Shelter. Then finally, we get to Altamont. And we get to the Rolling Stones arriving via helicopter, and we see all the fans arriving, way, way more than anticipated. And the parking, I mean, the visuals from the helicopter above, the miles and miles of cars, and people just parking along the sides of the street, the one street leading into Altamont Speedway. It's fascinating. And that's where the movie, the documentary, gets better. A lot better. Because now we're in the heart of this whole story. The meat and potatoes of what happened. And the footage is fantastic, given it was 1969. This was not a time when everybody had a camera and everybody could record what was going on. I shudder to think what this movie would have been like if everybody in that crowd had a camera, a phone, like they do nowadays, to record what happened. So you had other bands playing at this concert. You see a performance by the Flying Burrito Brothers. You see a performance by Jefferson Airplane, where things started to get out of hand. Their lead singer, Marty Balin, supposedly hit in the face, knocked out by one of the Hells Angels. Grace Slick does a great job of trying to address the situation with the crowd, basically rationalizing to the people out there that we have to have the Hells Angels here. I'm paraphrasing, but she basically says whether you like them or whether you don't, they're a necessary evil for what's going on here. They have to keep the peace. And then we get, thankfully, we get a few brief moments with the Grateful Dead, not on stage. Thank you for sparing us a Grateful Dead performance that would have probably knocked my rating down at least half a frenzy, if not a full frenzy. But then we get right into the Rolling Stones. And as I mentioned, the footage is remarkable for the time. You see the frustration with the Stones as they have to start and stop and start and stop and plead with the crowd. It seems like Mick Jagger is trying to work with the Hells Angels. They're talking, they're communicating. Keith Richards doesn't really say a lot in this, but when he does speak, it's at the concert, and he seems to be pointing out a couple people, one or two people that are really, really pissing him off. Now, I don't know if they were Hells Angels. They might have been. But he basically, being quiet through the entire documentary to this point, starts pointing people out and saying, we're not going to play if that person doesn't stop beating people up. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm pretty close. And then, of course, you have the tragic death, the stabbing death. Hells Angels member stabs somebody in the crowd to death. Now, again, if you know your rock and roll history, you know the outcome of this. And Gimme Shelter shows you clear as day, pretty much, what got the Hells Angels member off. In terms of, he did not get charged with, he got charged with murder, but he got off on murder. It was ruled self-defense. So if you're not aware of what happened, watch the movie. And you'll see why, even though it was a tragedy, I've seen a lot of people discuss this in social media and critics, and everybody's got a different take on it. Everybody's got a different perspective. And there is one creepy scene towards the end, right before the stabbing death, where you see another member of the Hells Angels. You see in the foreground Mick Jagger singing, and in the background you see this Hells Angels member basically falling apart mentally right behind him. I don't know if he's on a bad acid trip or what, but it's striking footage. And eventually one of the leaders of the Hells Angels sees this, grabs him, pushes him off the stage, basically saying, "Get the hell out of here." But as I was saying, different perspectives on this movie, on this event, in terms of who people side with. Some people are going to say it was all Hell's Angels' fault. I will say the rational people who I've heard comment on what happened at Altamont have said it was just a massive clusterfuck. It was a conglomeration of all these different screw-ups and mistakes that led to this. Now, to me, one of the big glaring problems with this, and I cannot do this justice, even though I'm explaining a lot of this to you, if you don't really know the deep background on what happened at Altamont, you got to see it. The visuals, you need to see the visual aspect of this. So no matter how well I try to describe it, you need to watch it. But you have there's no distance. I mean, I think I read that the stage was maybe 5 or 6 feet high, which is nothing. And I don't even think it was that high. It looked to me like it was maybe 4.5 feet high, because people are crammed up at the front of the stage, leaning on the speakers. It was not logistically set up well. And this is part of the reason why this led into the conflict between the Hells Angels playing security and the drugged out, drunk, high as hell hippies out there, taking their clothes off, walking around naked, trying to get on stage. You've got to watch this as a piece of rock and roll history. Now, I will again stress that it starts out really, I don't want to say slow, but you sit there and you wonder, what is the purpose? What is the point? I thought I was watching a documentary about what happened in '69 at Altamont. You have to stick with it for the second half. The last 45 minutes are the payoff. And that's when you're witnessing the event. That's when you're witnessing rock and roll history, for better and for worse. So I will give Gimme Shelter, I'll give it a week 3 frenzies. The second half, phenomenal. First half, again, you get great live performances, but what does it have to do with the overall story of Altamont? So, first time I've ever watched Gimme Shelter, I'll give it a week 3 frenzies. Still worth watching, especially if you are a rock and roll fanatic like me. Now, next week, when your Uncle Dave is back, I mentioned Smashing Pumpkins. We've got some songs we'll probably start digging into over the next couple of weeks. We've got a new song from Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top, Close Enemies, a brand new band featuring Aerosmith's Tom Hamilton. Spin Doctors are back with a very, very cool new song. So we'll get back to our normal format, at least for a week or two, once Dave comes back next week. And that, of course, will be our first weekend edition episode of February. Of course, this episode dropping on January the 25th, 2025 on Spotify, Good Pods, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Amazon Music, Audible, and iHeartRadio. And then, of course, you can always find links to each and every episode of the Weekend Edition and the Sports Edition, which drops every Thursday morning, on our Facebook page. So let's move on to TV and streaming, shall we? Still kind of working my way through a lot of the shows that we've been discussing over the last few weeks. Finally playing catch up on Paramount Plus with Tulsa King and Landman. We'll have reviews of those, the second season of Tulsa King, the first season of Landman coming up, I would imagine probably mid-February, a couple episodes from now. I will tell you that we are officially done with Going Dutch, which is sad. I watched the first 3 episodes and I can't waste my time on it anymore. I can't. They have wasted Dennis Leary. They have wasted him. And as Dave and I said after we watched the first episode, this needed to be on FX or somewhere where it could have been R-rated and had language instead of being on network TV. It wants to be edgy, but it's not nearly edgy enough because it can't be because of the restrictions of network TV. And with Dennis Leary, you can't hold him back like that. And his daughter, I don't like the daughter. I pretty much don't like anything about the show other than Dennis Leary. It's not really all that funny. So instead of wasting your time, my time, Dave's time, we're calling it quits 3 episodes in on Fox's Going Dutch. Now we still got American Primeval. I'm about halfway through that. I know Dave's working on it. That's another one here in the next week or two we're going to review. We're also going to be reviewing Secret Level Season 1. I'm almost done with that. I know, you're wondering, why is it taking so long to get through Secret Level? The only excuse I can give you is because of the way it's structured. 15 little animated vignettes based on different video games, because the narrative is so choppy and so broken up. You get 10 minutes of this story, and then the next story is a completely different world or universe with a completely different narrative. You can only really watch 2 or 3 of them at a time. So I'm through the ninth story in season 1 of Secret Level, which I believe is The Outer Worlds, which I thought was pretty good. And next up is Mega Man. So that's another one. American Primeval and Secret Level. Dave and I will have reviews of the full seasons for both of those in the next week or two. Which leads me into my review for the week. Squid Game 2. Now, I have to tell you something about this. Now, I stay away from spoilers. You know this. I don't like to give spoilers. If I can avoid it, I prefer to let you have months and months to watch a movie or watch a TV show until you've had every possible chance. If a movie goes on to streaming, then we'll give you a couple weeks and then maybe we'll start to discuss it a little more in depth. Now, Squid Game 2 has only been out since the end of December, so I definitely that's still well within, for me, spoiler window territory. I do not want to spoil things for you. But I have to tell you as a public service one thing about Squid Game 2. I just want you to keep in mind that this is basically part A. This is basically part A because you notice how Netflix almost immediately after Squid Game 2 dropped, they announced that coming later in 2025 is Squid Game 3. The reason for that? This seems like one long season that they decided to split into two. So you are not getting any type of resolution at the end of Squid Game 2. This is kind of like what they did with Yellowstone. The last season of Yellowstone, remember how they chopped that up in half? And we had to wait, what, a year and a half between Part A, Part B in the final season of Yellowstone? Even though this is not going to take nearly as long, that's the format, that's the structure here for Squid Game 2 and 3. So it's going to stop after the final episode, and you're not going to be happy, you're not going to be satisfied because the story is not done yet. So, in as vague of terms, yet with some detail, here's what I'll give you. So, our hero from, quote-unquote hero, our hero from the first season, and I'm not going to try to, I'll butcher all these names. They're all obviously Oriental names. I will butcher them. So I'm just going to, again, be very vague about my descriptions in this respect. Our hero from season 1, who survived Squid Game. Okay, now that's a spoiler, but if you haven't watched the first season by now, that's on you. Okay? So the guy who survived the first season is obsessed with bringing the whole enterprise down. The whole shady, if you want to call it a conspiracy, down. He wants to end the Squid Games once and for all, save these people from themselves, which is what makes Squid Game interesting. It's a moral conundrum. How far are you going to go to try to save other people from themselves? From their greed, from their violent natures that are buried inside of them. So our protagonist from the first season, at the start of the second season, is trying to set up, with all the money he won, being the survivor of the Squid Games from the first season, he's got all the money in the world now. He's using it to hire people, to set up surveillance all over the place, in subway stations around the city, to try to track down the mysterious gentleman, if you remember, who will look for people who seem to be down on their luck, challenge them to a game, give them the shady, mysterious business card, where they can then call in, have the minivan pick them up and take them to the mysterious remote island where they hold the Squid Games. So the first episode and a half is that premise, is that setup. Trying to track down this mysterious gentleman, the emissary for the much more rich and powerful people actually running the Squid Games. And I actually liked that part of this. It's not necessarily action-packed, but it makes sense if you're going to extend this narrative beyond the first season it makes a lot of sense to do it this way. And so I thought the first episode and a half really, really interesting, a really good setup. And then, of course, this is where I'm going to tell you just a little bit more, and then I'm stopping. Because, again, no spoilers. But things get a little bit more predictable at that point, because then the protagonist, they find the guy. And even though he's slippery and shady, somehow the protagonist gets his way back in to yet again play Squid Games again. He is somehow selected and brought in, again, being very vague here. So he has to go through the whole process, the games again. Then, of course, the rest of the season 2 is all about the dynamic of him, all these new players. There's one storyline that I ended up not liking once he gets on the island and starts engaging in the games. You know, again, there's a lot going on with the group dynamics, and that's really the big part of this is who's going to betray who's actually halfway sane and reasonable, and who's an absolute greedy, violent nutfuck, that type of thing. But there's one part of the story that the audience is let in on very early on in season 2. So we know something that the characters, including our protagonist, we know something that they don't. Something very crucial, very vital, which ends up playing a very, very key part at the end of the second season. I liked it at first, but it wears on you episode after episode after episode. And then, again, like I said, this is half a season, technically. Squid Game 2 is half a season. So I kind of figured out something was not going to get... The plot was not going to get resolved when I saw it. Remember, there's 5 games. 5 overall games that you have to play to get to the end to win all the money and survive. When I saw that the second game was going to drag out forever. I mean, we're talking over the course of multiple episodes. I said, there's no way they're going to get all the way through this. There's no way. I knew that, I believe we're talking 7 episodes here for Squid Game 2. And I'm sitting here going, there's no way. There's no way we're in the second game and we've only got 2 episodes left, roughly. There's no way they're going to be able to end this. And sure enough, they don't. It's an open-ended storyline that does not conclude at the end of episode 7. So that is frustrating. That part of it is very, very frustrating. And the last thing I'll say before I give you my rating is that once you've seen the original, the first season, a lot of the shock value is gone. So this is one of those shows that I kind of sort of wish they hadn't revisited and tried to extend it out longer than it really needed to go. I will still give Squid Game 2 a week 3 frenzies. Because as I said, the setup explaining why they're continuing into a second and a third season is plausible. It's done well. The second half of the season, in particular, once you figure out that there's no conclusion coming, is a little frustrating, and the whole process is a little repetitive because we've seen it, we've been there, we've done that with the first season. That's why I'm being a little harsh on this and only giving it a week 3 frenzies. I will still recommend it, even if you've seen season 1. Season 2 is worth watching. I'll watch season 3. I'm hoping that they have some really cool plot twists and much better plot developments and games. Maybe some new games at the end that we haven't seen yet. Some more creative things. I have faith, but season 2 isn't quite as good as you would have hoped. So a week 3 frenzies for Squid Game 2. All right, so this time in the podcast, weekend edition, usually roughly, we tackle movie news, TV and streaming news that we think is important to us and to you, hopefully to you. Now, you know, I have my fondness for professional wrestling, although I will admit it comes and it goes. It really does. And I am on the downturn right now. Don't watch it nearly as much as I did with the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic. About the last year and a half, I've kind of calmed down on watching wrestling. But I still will watch the big events. And now, WWE, of course you know that it just recently debuted on Netflix with Monday Night Raw. Now WWE has formed a partnership, a joint multi-year partnership with TNA Wrestling, which I would say probably the number 3 wrestling alliance, wrestling business out there. Of course, AEW is number 2. And we saw this coming. We'd seen people from TNA popping up, making appearances in, the Royal Rumble last year, I believe. Here, there, everywhere, popping up, I believe, on NXT on Tuesday nights. So this is really no shock to anybody. And hopefully it works out for everybody. We'll have some WWE stars showing up on TNA, and of course vice versa. But right now I'm just not overly impressed with a lot of what Triple H is doing since he's taken over from Vince McMahon. Now next week I will of course have my review of Saturday night's main event, which of course, as you're listening to this on the 25th, tonight is the second installment of the most recent iteration of Saturday night's main event on NBC. So that's kind of a big deal. So I'll watch it. I'm expecting something big to happen, hopefully. And then, of course, we do have the Royal Rumble and Elimination Chamber, I believe, are coming up here before we get to WrestleMania. But I'm just not liking, I don't like Cody Rhodes. I'm glad Roman Reigns is back, but they haven't really done enough with him yet. Yes, I know he had to go through the whole feud with the Bloodline to get the Uefala back. I know, I get it. Making Kevin Owens arguably the top heel along with Drew McIntyre. That I like. I love it when they take the faces and turn them. But John Cena, this John Cena coming back for his retirement year, I never liked John Cena as a wrestler. He was part of the reason I stopped watching. Doesn't hold any appeal for me, and I swear to God, if he wins the Royal Rumble, I'm going to puke in my shoes. I would rather see CM Punk win, and I don't like CM Punk at all. But at least that makes more sense long term than letting John Cena miraculously win the Royal Rumble and getting a title shot. Anyway, that's enough about wrestling. I'm sorry. Again, Dave's not here to keep me in check. Now, as you listen to this, Paramount Plus, Gladiator 2 is now out on Paramount Plus for streaming. They made an announcement at the last possible minute. Even last week's episode, we couldn't get it to you in time. We record usually every Wednesday night. So Paramount dropped this news less than a week before Gladiator 2 actually debuted on January the 21st on Paramount Plus. So get out there if you've got a subscription to Paramount Plus. Check out Gladiator 2 because that will be our featured movie review next week. Also, more news on Paramount Plus. They have canceled. This kind of shocks me. Now, this is an instance where I will say this show wasn't for me. I watched a couple episodes, didn't grab me. But Frasier, the reboot of Frasier, canceled by Paramount Plus after just 2 seasons. And I'll say it again, that's kind of shocking to me. That would be one of the few flagship shows on one of these streaming platforms that I would think would have been safe until they decided to call it quits. Now, they say they're going to shop it. I don't know where. I don't know who's going to take it. But we'll see what happens. But for right now, Frasier is done after 2 seasons. The new version is done on Paramount Plus. Now, you know Dave and I always joke, been listening to the Weekend Edition here for the last 4+ years. You know we have a story about the show Terriers. Now, Terriers was one of the first great shows on FX. Donald Logue starred in Terriers. Basically, kind of a cop show. I won't say it was a throwback to the classic 70s and early 80s cop and detective shows, but it was close. It was a little quirkier, a little bit more up to date. And they gave us the cliffhanger ending at the end of the first season. Basically, the characters have to decide, they're driving, they have to decide whether they're going to turn right or turn left. One way will take them to the border. One way takes them back the way they came, so they can continue to try to redeem themselves and solve the mess that they've gotten themselves wrapped up in. And then, of course, there wasn't a season 2. And to this day, Dave and I are still furious about the fact that we never got resolution on what happened, because it was a phenomenal show. I believe it's still available on FX. If you want to torture yourself and watch it's a brilliant show, but you're never going to get a resolution. Well, guess what? We've got another Terriers situation for you, and that would be with Peacock. And a show that Dave and I reviewed and we both liked back in 2024. Teacup has been canceled after one season by Peacock. Now, if you watched Teacup, you know, same thing as Terriers. You got an inconclusive ending where more characters, new characters were introduced, and they promised that they were going to go deeper into what was going on in this plot involving aliens in this, I don't want to say dome, but this kind of barrier where if you dared to cross through the barrier without a certain type of protection that's explained in season 1, you basically get fried up, eaten up like acid. And at the end of season 1, again, they were just getting into more of the mythology of what was going on here. New characters entered into the thing, and we're never going to get a resolution. This is terrible. And there are other people I saw on social media agreeing with me. Don't do a show like this if you're not going to give us some form of a resolution. Don't act like you know for sure you're going to get renewed by the network or the platform that you're on, and then you don't, and you leave all the viewers hanging. It's infuriating. It's basically, again, bad business. So no more Frasier, no more Teacup. Now, in terms of shows that are still going on and are getting renewed because they are popular, season 3 of The White Lotus has not debuted yet, but it has already been renewed for season 4 on HBO Max. Now, I watched the first 2 seasons. Wouldn't normally be my cup of tea, but I liked the first 2 seasons. My daughter got me into them. I'm going to watch season 3. I really am. And I think the best part of season 3 is going to be I don't have to deal with Jennifer Coolidge, who has got to be the most overrated, idiotic actress in decades. She plays this stupid little buffoon role. I don't know if she's like that in real life, but if this is method acting and she's bought into it to this point where it seems like this is the kind of human being she is on camera and off camera, ugh, God help us all. I'm sick of her in these Discover commercials, and thank God she will not be in season 3 of The White Lotus. But we will get a season 4. Now, I don't know when that will happen. I would imagine with how slow these streaming services work, we might get lucky and get season 4 late 2026, would be my guess, at the earliest. And then a couple things. Dave's not here, and this sucks because he should be here to comment on these, but if I wait another week, they're going to be old news. Number 1, a show that he really, really loves. I haven't gotten into it yet, on Netflix, and that would be The Lincoln Lawyer. The Lincoln Lawyer has been renewed for a 4th season on Netflix. So I will have to pass that along to your Uncle Dave. I haven't been able to get into the show yet. I do want to, but it's, I hate to say this, it's kind of way down the list of priorities for me. And yes, I do have a list. I have got a list of dozens of shows. Either old shows I want to rewatch or newer shows that I have never been able to get to. I still need to get through season 2 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I still need to get through season 2 of Heels, among others. Those are just the 2 that pop into my head. Season 2 of Joe Pickett I've got to finish up. There's a lot of good content out there. Now, tying into The Lincoln Lawyer, again, something I wish the Conquistador was here for. He is a big fan of Bosch. Now Bosch was on Amazon Prime, I believe. And Titus Welliver starred as Harry Bosch, the main character. There's a connection between that show and The Lincoln Lawyer, which we just discussed. Of course, both are based on books by Michael Connelly. This is not great news for Dave, because even though Bosch ended, they started up Bosch Legacy, kind of a spin-off series, and Titus Welliver was still involved as Harry Bosch, but now it looks like Titus Welliver is jumping ship, and God help us all, it's looking like he is going to star in a spin-off series for CBS, a spin-off of The Equalizer. What they have done to my beloved Equalizer is atrocious. Okay? The original TV show, and then even the Denzel Washington movies, as great as they are, I'm fine with those. But this awful, stupid fucking show with Queen Latifah now as the Equalizer, not Robert McCall, but Robin McCall, it reeks of wokeness, it reeks of PC garbage, and I will never be able to suspend my disbelief enough to believe that Queen Latifah is out there kicking ass and taking names. I'm sorry. I can't buy that. And now they're going to bring these new characters in, including Titus Welliver, and then they're going to have a spin-off with these characters when they appear soon on The Equalizer. Oh! Hollywood is bereft of new ideas. And the ideas they have are usually offensive and stupid, like this. But that's going to do it, for the most part, for our movie and TV and streaming news. We do have to discuss new trailers, and we have to discuss the Oscar nominations, and then we'll get into my featured movie review of the week, which of course is going back in time to review just a few years. We're going to review Den of Thieves. All right, so we're gonna start off the movie stuff technically with the Oscar nominations. And I'm not going to get into the weeds in this. I chose to do it this week because I know Dave is not into this stuff. And I'm really not into it anymore in terms of the show and all the red carpet bullshit and Hollywood patting itself on the back. I mean, every single minute, it seems like, that passes, Hollywood becomes more and more disgusting to me in their little insular community, and how we're the cool kids and you're not. And if you don't get these movies, then you're just stupid. Go back to flyover country in the Midwest. It's just they're bitter and they're still angry because when they were in high school, nobody liked them. They were in the drama club and they couldn't relate. They had to withdraw into themselves and create these fantastical alternate characters to try to fit in. And to this day, even though they're now some of the biggest stars are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, even 80s, they're still bitter and nasty about it. And they still hold it against everybody outside of New York and California. And I've told you, I have been delving into when we get to the end and the dumbasses of the week, I have been digging in when it's appropriate to the educational backgrounds of these people in entertainment and in Hollywood and New York in particular. And I got news for you, kids. They ain't as smart as you and I. They are not. But of course, they will tell you they are. So let's just run down the 10 pictures, the 10 movies nominated for Best Picture. Anora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Emilia Perez, by the way, a PC Alphabet Mafia wet dream is what that movie is. That's the only reason it is getting the attention it's getting, is because it checks all the boxes, and Hollywood loves it for that. Because I have heard people say that, I believe Selena Gomez is in this movie, that her Spanish accent is the worst ever. Her Spanish accent, her use of the Spanish language is atrocious, because even though her last name is Gomez, she doesn't speak Spanish. I'm Still Here, Nickel Boys, The Substance, which I do want to see. I do want to see The Substance, and of course, Wicked. Now you tell me what you think of that list of 10 nominees for Best Picture. Now, I'll tell you what they did. They were really sneaky here, in that they got in all the artsy-fartsy crap that they wanted, all the checkbox stuff they wanted. Again, Emilia Perez. But did you notice how they slipped in some box office hits? Like Wicked and Dune Part 2. Now, out of these 10, you guys, if you've been following the weekend edition, you know I have seen Conclave. It was very good up until the ending, and of course the ending, again, is the sole reason this movie is getting the attention it's getting, is because it's a woke ending. There's always an agenda with Hollywood. There is always an agenda with Hollywood. Now, out of what's left, the other 9 movies that I have not seen on this list, I already mentioned I want to see The Substance. Definitely want to see that. I'm actually kind of shocked and happy that that got in, made the final cut for Best Picture. I don't care. I saw the first Dune, and it didn't do enough for me to warrant me watching Part 2. I do want to see The Brutalist, even though it is ungodly long, over 3.5 hours long. And I will probably, God help me, maybe subject myself to A Complete Unknown, even though I can't stand Bob Dylan. That one I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence for A Complete Unknown. I will try to watch The Substance whenever Mubi will allow us to, because of course Mubi is trying to start up their own streaming platform, so that means that we're not going to be able, at least from what I have heard, not going to be able to watch it on Netflix or Prime Video or Max. Now, A Complete Unknown will end up going to Hulu. The Brutalist will end up going to Max, from what I can tell. I'm not going to go through all the actors and actresses. I'll just hit on the highlights and the lowlights. A lot of praise for A Complete Unknown. A lot of praise. Timothée Chalamet, Best Actor. Edward Norton, Best Supporting Actor. Monica Barbaro, Best Supporting Actress, all from A Complete Unknown. Congratulations to Demi Moore for getting nominated for Best Actress. For The Substance, happy to see Guy Pearce, one of my favorite actors, nominated for Best Supporting Actor for The Brutalist. Kind of puzzled by Isabella Rossellini being nominated for Conclave as Best Supporting Actress. She really didn't do all that much in the movie. So that one, even though Conclave wasn't a bad movie, I question Isabella Rossellini in terms of that performance actually being Oscar worthy, because she just didn't have enough to do. Ralph Fiennes in Conclave, I will flip the script on that. He was the focal point of the movie. There were other great performances in supporting roles, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, but Ralph Fiennes definitely deserved a nomination for Conclave. But then my final observation before we move on to trailers for the week. Again, Hollywood always has an agenda. And it's not about the best in creativity, which is what it should be about. And once we get to my movie review, I'm going to say something shocking and startling about acting and performances in movies. But The Apprentice ends up getting nominees for Best Actor, Sebastian Stan, and Best Supporting Actor, Jeremy Strong. If you don't think that's Hollywood saying fuck you to Donald Trump, you got your head buried in the sand. That is, again, a Hollywood agenda. Nothing more, nothing less. And I'm not ripping on Jeremy Strong and Sebastian Stan. They are great actors. But this is purely, simply a Hollywood agenda item, a middle finger to the new president of the United States. New, in quotes. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. But in this sense, thumbs up. Awesome. But not for Hollywood doing their little insidious dance, nominating two actors for The Apprentice, which did jack shit at the box office. Next week, Dave and I, by the way, will discuss the Razzie nominations, and we'll bring this up again all over, where Hollywood will praise performances in a movie denigrating a Republican president, but then they will denigrate performances in a movie that praises a Republican president. We'll discuss that next week. All right, trailers for this week. Some new cool trailers that are out. The Monkey. Of course, the upcoming Osgood Perkins movie based on the Stephen King short story. I still have got to see Longlegs. And I'm not sure where. Do I have to get Shudder to see that? I mean, I know I can buy it for $20, but I'm just not into doing that. Prices for Blu-rays are ridiculous right now, as Hollywood is pushing us into digital, which I hate because they can take the digital rights away from you whenever they want. Whereas if you own the DVD or the Blu-ray, you own it. They can't take it away from you. But the monkey looks tremendous. It's got a little bit of a Final Destination vibe to it, which I love the Final Destination movies, and we've got a new one of those coming out later in 2025. Scared to death that they're going to ruin everything that they've done with the original set of movies. We'll see. But the monkey looks like it definitely has that kind of vibe to it. Trailer looks very, very cool. And you know I'm all in on a good horror movie. Speaking of which, Drop. Now, when I heard that the first trailer for this had, yes, dropped, I was a little skeptical when I read the description. And then when I watched the trailer the first time, it was a little irritating because a lot of it involves technology and the phone. And I am one of the few people on the face of the earth that hates smartphones. Oh, let's carry around our little computer and take selfies and not live our lives, just stare at this little small screen 24/7. But I digress, just a little bit. Because Drop is about a woman who goes out on a date, a first date, and then somebody somehow starts sending what the kids call drops on her phone, basically telling her, you will do what I tell you to do, or we will kill your children. Basically. Now, again, the first time I watched the trailer, I wasn't really sold. I nearly got a headache from that sound from the phone pinging all the time, every time she'd get a message or a drop from this psychopath. Ding, 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 ding. I'm like, oh my God. Watched it again. Watched the trailer again. Once you get beyond that, it looks like it could be a very, very cool, not a classic, but a very cool, serviceable horror thriller. So you check out the trailer for Drop and let me know what you think. You can always comment on our Spotify page or on our Facebook page. Then finally, this one I did not like. And it's another horror movie. This is from A24. A24, I know, is the hot, chic, cool studio right now. But to me, they've had just as many abysmal misses as they have had interesting hits. And this one looks like it's going to be an abysmal failure. Opus, coming soon from A24. John Malkovich plays a reclusive old hip-hop artist, I think. Maybe is what I'm getting out of this. And he invites a select group of people. Or is it reporters, maybe? Maybe it's reporters. I don't know if it's contest winners or if it's reporters or both, to come to his secluded compound as he is going to drop the greatest album of all time. And they get to be the first ones to listen to it. But meanwhile, he's surrounded by these weird people. It looks like it's a cult. And the trailer did nothing for me. The trailer did nothing for me. It didn't look interesting. It looked too weird, too quirky. It reminded me of Midsummer, which people actually like. And Midsummer was one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. Only topped by possibly another A24 movie from last year. I saw the TV Glow. So, as I mentioned, I'm not as big of a fan as A24 as a lot of other people are. My daughter included. My daughter will watch anything and everything that comes out of A24. But I liked the trailer for The Monkey. I liked the trailer for Drop. Did not like the trailer for Opus. And it's not Opus from Bloom County. I would be much more into it if it was. All right, so there you go. Trailers done for this week. I gave you my take on the Oscar nominees. So now let's tie this all together. I mentioned that I was going to give you my movie review and I was going to discuss great performances in movies and how my viewpoint differs a ton, let's put it that way, from the Academy and all the not music, in this case, music snobs. No, usually I'm dealing with music snobs. Now we're talking about movie snobs, movie critics, and movie snobs. Now, my movie review this week. If you guys keep up on current releases, which I'm sure most of you do, you know that Den of Thieves 2, Pantera, is out in theaters right now. It spent one weekend at number one. Looks like it's going to do well enough where we might get Den of Thieves 3, depending on how Pantera wraps up, if there is a definite conclusion or not. But I decided, let's go back and watch Den of Thieves, the first movie. I had never watched it. I don't know how that happened, considering it is in my wheelhouse. A heist thriller, a crime drama, that's one of my favorite types of movies. But somehow I never got around to watching Den of Thieves. So now the first Den of Thieves, of course, stars Gerard Butler as Nick O'Brien, head of the, I think it's Violent Crimes Unit or Major Crimes Unit in LA, taking on a bank robbery heist crew. Now, stop me if you've heard this before, but this sounds an awful lot like Heat, the classic Michael Mann movie that starred Robert De Niro and Al Pacino and Val Kilmer. And if you watch Den of Thieves, and you should, it's a good movie. It's a really good movie. It's not quite as good as Heat, but it's still really good. And I'll get to the thing about performances in a moment. But even though Den of Thieves kind of reeks of being Heat minor, now we know Heat Part 2 might be coming out as Michael Mann put the book out, Heat Part 2, and they're working on a movie. So I don't want to say this is Heat Part 2. This is minor league Heat, I guess we would say. Even though that sounds like a B-level baseball movie. Or a porno about baseball. Minor league Heat. But the same narrative thread is basically there. You've got the cops who try to be decent, but they're not. You know, they'll break the rules, they'll do whatever it takes, and they will ruin their families and their home lives in order to do it. Against, of course, the criminals who basically feel the same way about what they're doing. They will break the rules, they will do whatever it takes in order to nab the score of a lifetime. Now, the interesting thing about the criminals in this movie, led by Pablo Schreiber and 50 Cent, is that they do have a code. At least for most of the movie. They do have a code. which keeps them from, it gives you a little bit of a gray area. It keeps them from becoming completely and totally 100% evil. Let's put it that way. This is an extremely well done, extremely well acted movie. I think the only thing that would keep, I'm going to give it a strong 3 frenzies. And again, our rating system is a 4 frenzy system. Yes, it's our version of stars. 0 to 4 stars, 0 to 4 frenzies. So a strong 3 frenzies for Den of Thieves. The performances are stellar throughout, except maybe for 50 Cent. The problem I had with 50 Cent was I just want to yell at him and go, open your mouth when you talk. He seems like he's always talking through clenched teeth, and you can't understand half of what he's saying. But other than that, no complaints at all about the performances. And this is where I'm going to tie my disdain for the Oscars and their disdain for normal moviegoers like you and me. I'm going to put a bow on this, tie this all, wrap it all up together. It is a shame. It is a shame that a movie like Den of Thieves, because it was put together to basically make money. I don't think anybody really thought it was going to be a blockbuster, but it was supposed to make a decent chunk of change, a decent profit, which is what most movies are supposed to do. Very few movies that are put out there are expected to be blockbusters, the tent poles. They're the ones that are supposed to. A movie like Den of Thieves is supposed to do what it did. Turn a profit, do well enough to start a franchise, which it did. But I'm going to tell you this right now, and you can laugh at me, and if you laugh at me, you're a movie snob. Because I guarantee I can find movies that you love, that Oscar voters and Academy Award voters would turn their noses up at your choices for great performances or great movies. Gerard Butler is phenomenal in this movie. His portrayal of Nick O'Brien, I thought, was brilliant. And I know, Gerard Butler, he's not a good actor. He's Jason Statham. He's Liam Neeson, the current trio of quote-unquote action heroes. That doesn't mean they can't have great performances. And that's where I have issues with the crowd in Hollywood that looks down their noses at actors and actresses who actually do decent movies, whether it's horror, whether it's mystery, erotic thrillers, crime dramas, and heists like this. Yes, we have seen awful performances in these types of movies. But not every movie that has a quote-unquote message or an agenda is good. And I guarantee if I were to subject myself to all 10 of the movies I mentioned a few minutes ago that are nominated for 2025 Oscars, I guarantee I would hate 3 or 4 of them. At least 3 or 4 of them. Guaranteed. Because I have tried over the last 30 to 40 years at least to watch as many of the nominees for Best Picture as possible to see what I'm missing, to try to learn what do these people see in a quote-unquote great movie that I'm not seeing. And I have learned over those 30 to 40 years that I'm not really missing much, that these people are pretentious asshats. And I will circle back around now to Den of Thieves. Den of Thieves, Gerard Butler is awesome in this movie. And I would, dare I say, if I could go back in time, I think I have to go back, what, 6 years? Is that when Den of Thieves came out? 2019, maybe? Maybe? Don't quote me on that. I would I would probably put his portrayal of Nick O'Brien in as one of my favorite performances of the year. You can smell the beer sweat and the cigarette smoke through your screen, your TV screen, oozing off of him. At one point early on, his wife says, "You smell like a stripper." And you can sense that. You can feel it. That's how good Gerard Butler is in this movie. This is a role he was made to play. You can rip on me all you want for saying I'm crazy, I'm out of my mind, but I'm telling you, he's great in this movie. Pablo Schreiber is great as the leader of the heist crew. O'Shea Jackson Jr. is awesome as the driver for the heist crew. And then, even despite the fact this does have a rip-off feel to it, a little bit of a rip-off feel to it, in that it feels like Heat all over again, just with not the cachet of having the top tier actors in it and the top tier director that Heat had. This has got a cool little twist at the end. I will tell you this. Den of Thieves has a great, cool little twist at the end that will help explain why we get Den of Thieves 2, at least partially, why we got Den of Thieves 2 Pantera. So very, very strong 3 frenzies for Den of Thieves. Again, the only reason it's not getting a higher rating is because it is Heat. It is basically reheated Heat. But beyond that, given that, it is awesome. Performances, the action, everything else about it is fantastic. So, Den of Thieves, solid, strong 3 frenzies. Squid Game 2, to recap, weak 3 frenzies. Gimme Shelter, the classic documentary about the Rolling Stones at Altamont, a weak 3 frenzies. But 3 recommendations nonetheless. So now you've got stuff to do here as you get over your hangover here on Saturday morning, January the 25th. All right, now we're moving on, of course, to part of the podcast every week. We do twice a week, the sports edition, Thursday mornings, and then here Saturday mornings, the weekend edition, of course, Moments of Silence, where we honor here those influential people from entertainment and pop culture. Of course, in the sports edition, it's all about the sports figures and icons. Of course, this could tie in to what we've been talking about on and off throughout this episode about the pretentiousness of Hollywood. And I am no way, shape, or form trying to denigrate David Lynch. David Lynch, the director, passed away here over the past week. I have never been a big fan of David Lynch. This is probably why Hollywood loves him. He's visionary. He's different. He's edgy. Okay, great. Twin Peaks didn't do anything for me. Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, just not really my thing. But Hollywood loves him. So, Thoughts and prayers to the family and the friends of David Lynch. And then we have a lot to discuss when it comes to music. And we all kind of know that this is coming. The landslide is coming where we are going to lose a lot of the greatest rock stars from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s here within the next 3 or 4 years. Because you can't beat Father Time. Although Keith Richards has tried. I've always been a big fan of John Cougar Mellencamp. Yes, I still call him Cougar because it's such an awesome fucking name. I don't know why he decided to get rid of it. But his longtime bass player kind of John Mellencamp reminded me of Billy Joel in the sense that they both kept that close-knit group of musicians together behind them for years and years and decades. Of course, Billy Joel, we know Liberty DeVito on drums was probably the big name out of his backing band, the backing group of players he had with John Mellencamp. He had Kenny Aronoff, Mike Wanchik, Larry Crane, and of course on bass was Toby Myers. And unfortunately, Toby Myers passed away here within the last few days. So thoughts and prayers go out to the family and friends of Toby Myers and, of course, the John Mellencamp community. If you were a fan of the band, of course, started off as Bob Dylan's backing band and then went off on their own. The last surviving member of the band, keyboardist, multi-instrumentalist Garth Hudson, passed away. And it's really sad. And I'm not a fan of the band. Really not. I know a couple of their songs. Down on Cripple Creek and The Night They Drove Dixie Down, but outside of that, not a big fan of the band. The Last Waltz, of course, considered one of the classic concert films of all time. But Garth Hudson was the last surviving member of the band. And that's kind of sad to me. Anytime I hear those words, the last surviving member has died of a band, I mean, that's just really, that hits home, even if it's a group, a band that I really didn't follow that closely. Because that's it. There's a finality there that just sucks. And then finally, John Sykes passed away. John Sykes might be one of the most undervalued members of the 80s rock clique that we always try to worship here on Sports Frenzy, the weekend edition. Dave and I love our 80s hair metal, our 80s rock and roll. And John Sykes played with Whitesnake on a couple of their bigger albums. And then, of course, he formed the criminally underrated Blue Murder. If you have not listened to the first Blue Murder album, you have got to listen to it. Jelly Roll, a spectacular song. The whole album is good. And that was John Sykes' baby. Carmine Appice, I think, was on drums in Blue Murder. But yeah, we lost a lot of interesting, important figures in the world of rock and roll this past week. And thoughts and prayers go out to everybody. From David Lynch to Toby Myers to Garth Hudson to John Sykes. And you know what that leaves us with? That leaves us with, as we pivot, can't do it as well as Dave, we pivot from grief and tragedy to abject stupidity, as we have our 3 nominees this week for the Red Foreman Dumbasses of the Week. And I'll admit, as opposed to the sports edition this week where I had a ton of really great choices, here for pop culture and entertainment, I got 3. And 2 of them are pretty closely tied together. So, and I will get a little bit nasty and mean-spirited here. So, but that shouldn't shock you. We emphasize the fact that we are politically incorrect. Dave and I use this podcast to not only inform and entertain you, but to vent and say the things that we can't say to most other people. So we're going to start off with the fact that I just found out that my most hated show now has, just like we have a weekend edition. This is what really disgusts me and disturbs me. Just like we have a weekend edition for Sports Frenzy, now The View is going to have The Weekend View. Because it's not enough that we get the hatred and the vitriol and the stupidity from these women 5 times a week. We got to throw in a 6th one on Saturdays. I think it's Saturday. Not like I'm looking it up and verifying it. I want nothing to do with this show, other than the fact that I can't get away from it because they say the most vile, nasty things. Get away with it and somehow continue to stay on the air. Who watches this shit? Who watches Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar? Who watches this drivel, this garbage? And there's a reason why Dave and I always say Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg get the first 2 seats on the plane of doom. Because they are evil, especially Joy Behar. So number 1 dumbass contender this week is the fact that we now have The Weekend View. Number 2 nominee. Remember all the way back, go back to the 90s if you can. If you're old enough, if you're like me, you're in your 50s, pushing 60, even if you're in your 40s, you'll probably remember when, in my opinion, the world changed for the worse forever. Was in the mid-90s. No, it wasn't grunge. It was 2 things. There were 2 things that happened. The O.J. Simpson trial and that idiotic old woman who sued McDonald's because she spilled hot coffee on herself and blamed McDonald's and won. Because McDonald's didn't have a warning label on their cup that said, "Caution, coffee is hot." And that's where the litigious society we now have started, and that's where the abject lack of personal responsibility started. So now people fuck up and they just, "It's not my fault, it's your fault, and I'm going to sue you and ruin your life." Well, we've got, unfortunately, another example of this. And you can get into the weeds and you can have a philosophical debate about, recalls on cars and what is a life worth in a court of law. If you're suing because of negligent homicide. But this stuff with burns. A woman in Texas sued Bill Miller Barbecue because she had barbecue sauce spilled on her. Now, I'm not sure if the waiter or the waitress spilled it on her or she spilled it on herself. But the details of this, her name was Genesis Monita, the woman who got burned. She got second-degree burns. Okay? Nobody wants to get burned, but second-degree burns aren't going to ruin your life. It wasn't like she got the burns on her face. Okay? Second-degree burns because the barbecue sauce, get this. The barbecue sauce, it is stated, it's somewhere at Bill Miller's, that the barbecue sauce will come out at a minimum temperature of 165 degrees. They do have that somewhere. I don't know if it's on the menu or on a sign in the entranceway, somewhere. And it was determined that the barbecue sauce that burned Genesis Bonita was at 189 degrees. Oh my God! Oh my God! Really? Oh God. The jury in Texas, they should really be the dumbasses. But we're going to lump in Genesis Monita along with the jurors who decided that the second-degree burns from barbecue sauce warranted, and again, remember what I said, posted temperature of 165 degrees, and it was 189 degrees. Okay? $2.8 million. $2.8 million. Can I dump barbecue sauce on me and get $2.8 million? This is horse shit on toast. We need to stop this. Personal responsibility. Medical bills were $25,000. She got $2.8 million from this idiotic jury. And finally, I told you, I warned you, I was going to have to loop back to something. So we're going back to The View. Ugh. They're an easy target because they're such idiots. They're nasty shrews. They're harpies. Now, we all know about the controversial sermon when Donald Trump was inaugurated as the president this past Monday. And I'm not getting into the weeds on the sermon itself. I'll leave that to other people. You feel about it how you feel about it. I know how I felt about it. So I am not calling Bishop Marianne Edgar Buddy, hey buddy, a dumbass for the sermon. But what I am calling her a dumbass for is she turns around and shows up on The View after the sermon to condemn, quote, culture of contempt, unquote, that we currently live in. So let me get this straight. You want to condemn the current culture of contempt. Say that 5 times fast. So you go on The View, which is the definition, the number one, primo uno example of the culture of contempt that you're condemning. Are you fucking insane? Do you not think about what you're doing? You just proved that your sermon was hypocrisy and bullshit by turning around and showing up on The View. Do you not get this? Do you not see this? So Bishop Marianne Edgar Buddy, Hey, buddy. Not for her sermon, but for having the stupidity to turn around and go on The View and then condemn our current culture of contempt. So, this is a tough call for me. Again, I despise The View with a passion. Could be the number one thing in the world that I hate. More than poverty, more than hunger, I hate The View. You can leave a comment on our Spotify page, our Facebook page. You let me know which of these three you think deserves this week's Red Foreman Dumbass Award. For me, it's tough. I think even though I hate The View as much as I do, and two of the three dumbass nominees are directly tied in, I'm going to go with the lawsuit. Because these lawsuits basically have everybody living in fear. What's the old example? A burglar, somebody who is going to break into your house, trips in your front yard, blows out their knee, tears up their leg, and they can sue you. What kind of bullshit is that? All of it, this barbecue sauce lawsuit, it's all nonsensical stupidity. And it needs to stop. Next week, of course, we'll go back to our normal format. Your Uncle Dave will review our nominees. He will select who he thinks is the Red Foreman Dumbass of the Week. But until then, I hope I got you through your hangover okay. We'll do this again in 7 days. Check out the sports edition every Thursday morning. But until then, I'm the Maestro Kevin Crane. Peace out, everybody.